Hi class, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about chapter 2, where to start. So we began our last class talking about the importance of research methods. I'd now like to talk to you a little bit about where we can go to get some of our research articles, right? Those empirical research articles that are so important. And we'll also discuss how to construct a research paper. So to begin with, when we think about coming up with a research question, we first need to start with theory. And what's theory? Theory are going to be organized sets of principles that allow us as researchers to describe or explain some aspect of an experience. I consider theories to be umbrella or overarching ideas that can influence and help us appropriately construct hypotheses. So what makes a theory a good theory? Well, to begin, it has to be falsifiable. And what does it mean to be falsifiable? Well, it should be easy. I should be able to disprove it in the same way that I should be able to prove it. And this is important because if a theory can never be disproven, then we will never be able to add to the literature on that topic. So again, this is very important. It's very crucial. From our theories, we can conduct or we can come up with hypotheses. And hypotheses are a type of idea or question. It makes a statement about something that may be true. It is tested via data collection. So this is empiricism from chapter 1. And just like our theory, our hypothesis can either be supported or refuted. So how do we form hypotheses? They may be from common sense, from observations around us, right? From our experiences, from the world, other theories, so past research, maybe a practical problem that we'd like to solve. So how do kind of all these ideas fit together? Well, when you read about this in your textbook, you'll be introduced to a research question, a hypothesis, and a prediction. Your research question is going to be used to identify and describe the topic that you'd like to investigate. And then kind of conduct research to answer these specific questions. Our hypothesis is going to be a tentative idea that we're waiting on then evidence from our data collection to either support or refute. And then a good research study will always have a prediction. This is a guess on the outcome that we expect to see from our hypothesis. So here is kind of the breakdown. Our research question is going to be some kind of description of a broad topic. Our hypothesis, as a review, is going to be that tentative idea or question. And then our prediction is deliberately guessing the outcome we expect to see. So let's take a look at this as an example. So here, our research question might be something like, are there differences among groups in terms of cell phone use while driving? And then we start to get a little bit more specific. Our hypothesis then might be, do males and females differ in their use of cell phones while driving? And then we're going to make our prediction. Females are more likely to use a cell phone while driving, right? So you've started out with something a bit more general, and throughout this process, we have made a little bit more narrow focus and a little bit more narrow focus until we can come up with an anticipation of what we're going to see. So who do we study in a research design? Well, it's important for us to kind of know what terminology that we'll be using when we're discussing research. And one thing you'll very frequently see in your research papers is a subsection listed on participants. So this is individuals who are participating in the study. You might also have seen participants referred to as subjects or respondents or informants. All of these terms, are used in a little bit different way, but again, are relating to the individuals who are participating in the study. Okay, so very often, particularly when we're doing an experimental design, we'll be talking about participants, research participants, or research subjects. So how do we generate an idea? How do we figure out what kind of study we want to do? Common sense, right? Things we just generally know. Observations, kind of seeing things around us. Reading about other research studies, so taking a look at theories. Maybe you've taken social psychology and you're really interested in a specific theory. Maybe you are wanting to know or dig into biases just a little bit more. Maybe you then, kind of start looking at those theories. You can construct your research study from that. You may also look at past research, what's been done. And then, of course, looking at kind of that practical application, maybe practical problems that exist and kind of applying research to that context. But before you do any research study, the first thing you need to find out is how much is already known about your research question. So if you came up with an idea, has somebody already studied that? The chances are probably yes, and I don't say this to you for you to kind of feel bad. The truth is, the field of psychology has been in existence for a very long time, and there are some very prolific researchers in the field who have all been spending their entire careers researching on an area in psychology. So the best thing for us to do is to kind of take a look at what research has been previously done. So journals are going to be a good place where we can find that information. So remember, we talked about peer-reviewed research journals. This is going to be a place where our research tends to be published. The results of that study is then disseminated to everyday people, right? So how do we find this? PsycInfo is a database that maintains kind of all of these psychology articles, or at least a good bit of them. This is a really, really good place for us to go. I often, though, get a question from students, well, why can't I just Google it? Well, there's a difference between search engines like Google versus PsycInfo. So the first and most important is quality control, right? So who can publish things, or how do you find things on Google? Well, anybody who wants to post anything on the internet can, and Google will bring those up. With PsycInfo, we can deliberately set search parameters to only look up peer-reviewed journal articles. So we know that research has been vetted. And so now we know where those articles are coming from. If you like Google, and I can show you this in class, we can actually go over something called Google Scholar. It is a search engine provided by Google, but it actually focuses specifically on publications. I actually use it quite frequently. It's a really great resource as well. If you're into looking up journal articles that might be more related to clinical trials and things like that, PubMed would be another really good research source for you. Also, one underused, very often underused search is in professional meetings. So as part of our jobs, we are supposed to present our research work at professional conferences. So anytime there's a research study that I've been working on, I can actually submit this and do a presentation on it. a paper presentation or a poster presentation. Well, all of this research actually ends up in a program, and typically it's used by anybody who's at the meeting, so they can see what posters they want to come to or what presentations they want to look at. But it's actually also really great for people who couldn't attend the meeting. You can see all current research that's being conducted, and all of the posters and the presentations do go through a peer review process. You actually have to submit them, and then somebody will take a look at your abstract to determine whether or not it will be accepted for presentation at the meeting. So you can feel pretty confident about some of that research as well. So how do you go about conducting a lit search, right? Let's say you want to find journal articles. This may be review for some of you, but I at least wanted to show you how we can go through and find this using our UNT Dallas library page. So we first need to go to Academics on our home screen and select Library. Within Library, we want to go to our electronic resources. This is where we'll be able to get all those journal articles that we're looking for. Within our electronic resources, we actually have a list of electronic resources that we can use. Every university pays for specific licenses. We actually recently got access to PsycInfo. I'm actually pretty happy about that. And so when you are looking through the electronic resources, you will select PsycInfo. And I'll show you how to do this when we're in class as well. You'll actually get a search engine that looks something like this. You can type in anything to look up here. You can type any of those into the search engines. Just remember that these words like and, you can kind of switch this to be and or, will bring up different search parameters. You can also further downgrade or kind of be more concentrated of what you look at by selecting a field, right? Author, keyword, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got additional options where, let's say you want to only look up articles that happened in the last 5 years or the last 10 years. You can do that. So you're looking at only the most current research on a topic. So what I would do is I would type in what I'm looking for. So here you see that I have and, right? So we've got verbal victimization, physical victimization, and internalizing problems. And all of these are accompanied with an and. What that means is my research article or whatever I'm looking for, I'm saying to the search engine, I want it to have verbal victimization and also physical victimization and also internalizing problems. Unless it has those three things, it will not bring it up for me in a search box. Okay, so this is why the and or becomes really important. So here is an example of a research article that I'd find. This is a book, so it tells me that it's a book. Here's a brief abstract of the research study. I also can take a look at what pages it is, what year it was published. And as you can see, I've got all different types of victimization in here. I have internalizing problems, just as I was looking for. So this might be a good resource for me. So I can go ahead and click on it. And again, we'll kind of go over this in class in a little bit greater detail. But just know that universities also pay access to some of these research articles. So specifically, if you log in using your UNT Dallas credentials, you'll get access to some of those research articles that you wouldn't if you did it on your home server. So I'll kind of show you that as well during our class. All right, So this leaves us with the last part of our chapter, which is the construction of a research article. All research articles in psychology will be constructed in the exact same way. This is great because that means that you know exactly what to expect. And these are specific to our research that's empirical research, right? That we're collecting data on. Not a review paper, right? But something that is conducting an experiment and then analyzing those results. So in a research article, the first page will be an abstract. An abstract is a Cliff's Note version of what you can expect in your research paper. It's almost like this brief little synopsis. It's not very long, only about 120 words, and it will actually include the hypothesis, a very condensed version of the procedure, and then largely what they found as research results. This always seems a little bit different, but even though the abstract is the first thing that you read in a paper, it's the last thing that's often written. And this is because I can't write about results until I've conducted it. And so what we end up seeing is that once a paper is fully constructed and fully written, authors will typically go back and write the abstract. For readers, it's a really good way to look through your articles and decide whether or not it's something you want to spend time looking at further. So let's say that the title of the article looks interesting. You read the abstract and you say, oh, well, this isn't done in a population that I'm really interested in for my research, right? You can skip over the article. So this is really good. It's a good piece of information to have. The next part of the article will be your introduction. And this is a very heavy part of your research. It outlines the problem that needs to be investigated. It also will give you a brief description of past research, past theories. It will also give you formal hypotheses, predictions of what would be expected. You basically have an introduction to convince people of why what you're studying is important and how you got to that with the understanding of knowledge in the field. You don't have a lot of space here to do that, right? I mean, you can't take all 500 articles, say, from a specific topic and have 500 different pages in your introduction. Instead, you would take that and maybe condense it to 5 pages, right? Depending on the research, depending on the journal you're submitting your research article to, there may be even stricter parameters. So some journals won't accept anything in an introduction larger than a couple of pages. So you have to be very deliberate and very concise in your introduction. Your methods section is going to be divided into different subsections. And a lot of this kind of depends on the author. But specifically within your method section, you want to know who your participants are, right? The procedure that was used. And so step by step, what the participant did from the time they entered into your experiment to the time they left. And then also what materials that you needed to use. They call this the materials and apparatus section. Did you use surveys? Did you use computers? Again, if you have a good method section, any person should be able to pick up your method section, not talk to you, but just read your method section and know exactly how to conduct that research study. In fact, they should be able to replicate that research study with precision without ever talking to you. That would be the hallmark of a really good methods. After this, we have our results section. So in our methods section, we're going to collect our data. In our results section, we're going to talk about those findings, right? And you do this through a narrative. Everything is written out in a research paper. So this would be a description of what you found. You would use statistical language here. So even when you conduct a statistical analysis, he would then come back and talk about this, and you would write it out, right? So you would say a significant interaction was found between X and Y. And then you would refer to in that section, you would also have the p-value, for example, 0.002. You also might have graphs and tables here, and while you would allude to this in your results section, the actual tables and graphs will appear in your appendix, which will be at the end of your research paper. But we're not done, right? So we have proposed a research study. We're telling you why it's important. We then collect the data on it. We then give you the results of it. But now we have to give you an overview, right? What does this mean? Why should you have bothered to read my research article? We'll discuss this in our discussion section. So this reviews research, again, from other previous research, and it's tied back to what you found. Oh, we found this significant interaction. Well, that makes sense based on X study, right? It also explains how the results you found compare with other results. You also will see how a lot of researchers will talk about practical application or future research based on what they found. And also here would be where you talk about any sort of issues you had or any weaknesses that you had with your methodology, but you always want to leave people on a strong note. So you really want to end with the strength of your research and what your research does as a whole. Finally, we'll end our paper with a reference section. Any of those research articles that you found and that you put in your paper, so any of those past research studies that were in existence, we have to make sure we credit those authors. And so we would put this in our reference section. This is a complete list of all material that we used in our research paper. I sometimes get students that refer to this as a works cited. Works cited is for MLA. In APA, we only have reference sections, and the way in which reference sections are formatted are extremely specific. In fact, we actually have the APA manual that goes over this. And just give me one quick second. So we've got actually, this is the newest APA manual. And of course, versions continually change with this. But within our APA manual, they talk about how to label graphs and figures. They also talk about plagiarism, how to have citations, when to use those citations. But they also talk about how to cite references as well. This is a very important book to have as a researcher and something that you should refer to often. I will also show you when we're in class how there are some online platforms that kind of have some of this material condensed if you don't have direct access to the APA manual at this time. All right, so that leaves us with kind of our brief lecture for Chapter 2. There's a lot more detail here than what we were able to cover in our brief lecture. So please do take a few more minutes to look through those articles and come to class with any questions that you may have. So here are some of the terminology from Chapter 2 in case you'd like to make some flashcards or kind of go back and revisit some of that key vocab. All right, so that brings us to the end of this chapter, and I will catch up with you again soon. Bye-bye.